My name is Dan Madden. I'm MD5, the National Security Technology Accelerator's Regional Director for the Mid-Atlantic region. MD5 is part of the Department of Defense. We partner with research universities and the venture community to solve emergent national security challenges. We have been in New York for a while now. We were actually born in New York about 2 years ago out of a summer study program at NYU. I'm hosted up at Columbia University. Columbia University is our host tonight. We're hosted by Columbia Entrepreneurship and the Columbia Startup Lab, so I want to thank them for having us. The kinds of challenges that we're facing as a country are changing very quickly, and we don't think that the next great product, the next great innovation that's going to help our country be safer is going to be coming out of the same contractors that we've been working with for the last 50 years. We don't think that the great ideas are going to come out of the Pentagon. We think that they're going to come out of collaboration between the solvers, the innovators, the technologists, the entrepreneurs that are inventing the future in the commercial world already, and their collaboration with the end users, the war fighters, the first responders who are in the most pressing need of their solutions. The kinds of challenges that MD5 helps to address can range from the narrow yet acute, like how do you go about protecting a soldier who's downrange in Syria from an explosive device being carried by a commercial drone, to how do you go about securing our critical infrastructure against state cyber intrusion from a Russia or a China. We see a lot of the most promising solutions coming from the same commercial technology areas that many of you are going to be excited about: AI, machine learning, autonomy, life sciences. But we do recognize that entering into the defense marketplace can be challenging. It can be daunting. We're here to help lower the barriers to entry. We have a variety of programs, a lot of them focused on enabling greater collaboration between the end users, customers, and the innovators in the private sector. We also have an acceleration portfolio, but I'll leave that to Greg, our acceleration portfolio director, to address. I want to introduce Jason Cahill, who is going to be our moderator tonight. Take it away, Jason.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So we're going to quickly go through little 2-minute background intros just so you get a sense of who we are. Before we even go that far, I just want to get a kind of poll and sense, because we can steer the conversation in a number of different ways. How many of you are just high-level familiar with what an SBIR is? Okay, good. So I don't have to educate anyone on that. What was the other question? Who's considering one? Okay, so a number. Who's an investor? All right. You can raise your hand all the way up. It's a good thing. I'm an investor too. Okay, cool. So by way of background, my name is Jason Cahill. I spent 7 years active duty Army, kind of pre and post 9/11, split half and half, 97 to 04. So I lived it firsthand what innovation can look like. As I was talking in the room earlier, one of the earlier fun systems we played with was a communication system that was meant to thwart IEDs. But by turning the system on, it rendered the communications offline. So you could either talk on a radio to call in an attack via aircraft, or you would get blown up by an IED. So difficult choice we had to make. After leaving the military, I was a consultant in the DoD-related space. Hated it because I like to build, I like to do. And as we'll talk about later on, there's a culture of one of the challenges in going into the DoD space is that you end up not really building a COTS product, but looking at sort of consulting services. So you're more of a research organization solving specific problems, but not sort of mass producing a hardware software product. So I left that, started my own company, sold my company, and now invest in companies. So I have kind of a perspective of the investor, the active duty, the consultant, so I've kind of spanned that.
All right, my name is Colonel Greg Coleman with MD5. I'm the Acceleration Portfolio Manager. And so just by way of kind of helping people kind of understand what MD5 is, because not a lot of people do. So Dan touched on it briefly. Essentially, if you start up here with the Secretary of Defense, then you have the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. We work for him. And we're a program office within DoD. Technically, we're in the Pentagon, but we actually keep our office is actually in Crystal City, so that we can very easily come and go and just meet with whoever we want to meet. So a little bit about me. So my background, I have like this weird hybrid background that you tend to not see in an Air Force colonel, right? So I'm one part Air Force operator. I spent the first part of my career on active duty, got out, went into the National Guard. So I spent, so 23 years in total as a pilot. Okay, so that's one part of my career. In my civilian career, I'm actually a tech entrepreneur. So I have as a founder of or am still the founder of a tech company that's still going, growing, profitable. Actually went through Techstars as a founder a number of years ago. And so I bring this interesting perspective from both a warfighter perspective, but also from an entrepreneurial perspective. So two types of operator, right? So that helps inform how I do it. But the funny thing about it is now I'm managing an SBIR process for MD5, and I'm not a contracting officer. So I guess it's kind of good is you have somebody who's not a contracting officer managing the process. My goal is just to stay out of jail and to try to go push as hard as I can, and still stay out of handcuffs. But big picture, what we're really trying to do is we are trying to figure out how to help the Defense Department more effectively work with early stage companies, because as early stage companies, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to play the standard DoD game. By the time a proposal kind of gets through the process, we've already gone through 2 or 3 iterations of our product, and the specs that we were talking about back before are not even relevant. Right? So we're trying to figure out how to accelerate that. I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what we're doing specifically as it relates to SBIR, but I just want to kind of give you that quick background.
My name is Kirk Burton. I spent the first 23 years, my first career as an active duty Army officer. When I left the service in 2005, I started working for a mid-sized R&D company, developing solutions for DoD clients. Did that for about 6 years and kind of got tired of that roller coaster. So I started my own company, did consulting for DARPA, for some universities around innovation systems. I've also been a director of engineering at an incubator down in Tampa, Florida area. Most recently, I won't go through the whole thing, but most recently I worked for DoD as an analyst in the DoD SBIR office. That ended about a month ago, and I took over a new project. So I am here to talk about DoD, but I do not represent DoD. I probably should make that disclaimer. But I've been involved probably for about 13 years with startups and kind of the innovation ecosystem in support of national security problems.
Hi, my name's Anita D'Amico, and I'm the CEO of a small business, a startup, called Code DX Incorporated. The DX stands for diagnosis, and we help diagnose vulnerabilities in your source code and in any kind of software. And our company started out with 2 SBIRs and BAAs. So I have also run an organization that was a cybersecurity organization that bid SBIRs, bid BAAs, and I've transitioned those technologies in a number of ways. And in the last 3 years, we started a new company, and we took the intellectual property out of the R&D company and brought it into the product company, and I run that company. And I still go back and I get R&D money to fund the development of new product capabilities. My background is completely different than everybody else's. I'm an experimental psychologist by training. And I've always worked in advanced technology. I've always worked in something that was on the cutting edge. I worked in the maritime industry, designing a new part of the Panama Canal. I worked in manned space. I worked in the beginnings of digital cartography, and then information warfare, and then cybersecurity. So that's kind of what I do. I'm a starter-upper. I'll pass the mic.
So I'm Warren Katz. I'm the managing director of the Air Force Accelerator, powered by Techstars up in Boston. Techstars is, I think you probably all have heard of Techstars, the network that helps entrepreneurs succeed, I think is the tagline these days. Background-wise, I'm an engineer by training. Worked for a defense contractor for a very short period of time after graduating college. Left, this was in 1990, started my own software company, completely funded by SBIRs. Which enabled me never to raise any angel money or any venture capital money. It's one of those unusual stories that it was 100% funded by SBIRs. We commercialized. We did what the SBIR program was intended to do, and we came up with a commercial product line. I sold the company in 2006. At that time, we had transitioned to 85% of our revenue was just from commercial product sales of our products. We still had a little bit of contracting work left. Stayed on with the new owner for a little while, left and became an angel investor and a mentor for Techstars in the Boston ecosystem. Did that for about 5 years. Had a small stint as a president of one of my investments. They needed somebody who had some of the relevant experience. It was an AI company called Neurala, great company, still doing very well. And then the Air Force called Techstars and said, hey, we want you guys to run an accelerator for us. They called me immediately because there's very few people in the Techstars ecosystem that had that much experience with the contracts with the DoD. Helped them score that deal, and they asked me to run it, and I said yes, but for really only one reason, which is the promise of redesign of the SBIR program and the AFWERX MD5, the new open topics that you're probably all aware of. I was instrumental in helping craft some of the new mechanisms around that, which I'm very excited about. It's a way to get the DoD to stop this incessant labor contracting, R&D, never commercializing anything, sort of push them into a more of a VC-ish type model. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm happy about doing it.
All right, so I'm just going to keep us honest and push forward. So, Kirk, vision of what DoD tries to do with SBIR, basic statistics, understanding you're no longer a DoD representative.
Sure. So DoD is unique among the organizations that take advantage of the SBIR program in that they're one of the few that are mission focused, which means when we're coming up with a topic for a SBIR contract, it's something that we want, or it's a problem that we think that we have that we need solved. The other agencies, some of the other agencies are focused more on research, on projects for the public good, but DoD is very focused on the mission. What the program does for us, along with the partner STTR program, is it gives us access to people who think differently. Small businesses, innovators, inventors who, we throw around the term non-traditional performers. There's actually a government definition for that. It says you haven't had a government contract in a year. My definition of a non-traditional performer is somebody that wakes up in the morning and the first thing they do is not go to FBO, Fed Biz Ops, and see what the government's asking for because they probably don't know it exists. But they're skilled. They have the ability to ideate and change direction quickly, which is something that DoD needs to be able to take advantage of. In terms of just rough statistics, the program, DoD is more than half of the SBA's program. This year, I think we'll hit about $1.5 billion dedicated to those programs. I have a bad memory, so I wrote down a couple of things here. But if you're interested, both the Air Force and the Navy have recently done an economic development study, or economic impact study, on what does this program actually do for us and for the country. I just pulled a couple of stats before I came over here. Navy and Air Force, when you combine them, you're looking at a rough order of magnitude of 15 to 1 for every dollar that they invest in the program. $15 come back in terms of economic development to the local community. So $6.25 billion turned into $92 billion for those two services. 316 companies out of the last 10 years have been acquired by larger companies. 310 companies successfully licensed their SBIR technology out to other people. And 174 new companies spun out of a SBIR program for another company. So those are good news stories. We're also responsible for our fair share of bad news stories for not planning ahead and taking advantage of the program. But I think as you'll hear tonight, things are changing. And DoD is kind of, the wake-up call. We're losing ground if we're not already behind on the pace that technology is able to be developed, and the program needs to change to support that.
Cool. And on that change thread, can I get your perspective on the MD5 change and then yours on the Techstars? And I was asked to just make sure you put the microphone.
All right, no problem. So when it comes to MD5, so we have 3 different lines of effort. We have the education portfolio, we have the collaboration portfolio, and then we have the acceleration portfolio. So education is a workforce development program where we're trying to work directly with the DoD to help them understand, like the actual warfighters, like the service members, the civilians that work for the department, to help them understand that innovation isn't just a catchphrase. It's actually an entire new way of thinking. So we actually have programs where we're teaching them tools, and even like our own version of like a lean canvas that we're calling a mission model canvas and design thinking, right? So there are a number of things we're trying to inject that that DNA into the department. The collaboration portfolio is where you see a lot of active engagement. So some of you may be familiar with programs like Hacking for Defense or other sort of programs. So those all fall within our collaboration. And the acceleration, my mandate as acceleration portfolio manager is to find companies that could possibly be viable dual-use ventures. Dual-use meaning defense business, and I'll even take any business outside of defense. It doesn't even have to be commercial for it to, for me to be interested in it. But if you can get some business from DoD with your product and some other business, then we have set up a number of programs and services designed to help you move through to become an actual provider to DoD, and we partner with like Founder Institute, Techstars, Mass Challenge. We're partnering with different universities for maker spaces. But one of the things that's been really interesting is kind of working with AFWorks and with Warren and his team on kind of reshaping SBIR. So just to give context of what we're doing versus kind of what everyone else is doing, is if you look at like your standard SBIR, I think it's like a 6-volume application with like a 20-page technical volume, and I think the I'm sure I'm not a contracting officer, and I think it's either 6-month performance and then either 3 months to 6 months of reporting, depending upon what agency you're with. So what we've done is we have now turned that into, okay, we just need to see a 5-page technical volume and a 15-page pitch deck. Okay, that's the application, okay? And then from the actual performance standpoint, now we're not doing 150,000, but we'll do 75,000, 2 months of performance, 1 month reporting, so a 3-month total period, and then you can start to apply for a phase 2, which is up to $750,000. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to shorten that cycle because, listen, $75,000 is nice, but that's not going to get you a year. That's not going to get enough runway for you to be able to actually do some of the things you need to do without having to go find external financing. And the problem is that a lot of these companies that we're working with are hardware companies, which by nature VCs tend to want to really focus on software. So it's a harder game if you're in the hardware business. And so we're trying to shorten things up and just trying to make it easier for the companies to get through. And then once we get them in, then, hey, you know what? Hey, we have some seats at Founder Institute. Why don't you do that? Hey, listen, why don't you apply to Mass Challenge? We got some seats there. Why don't you apply to a Techstars program? Hey, we have some maker spaces that you can help maybe do some rapid prototyping, right? So we're trying to develop a full service platform to really help these companies get all the way to viability. And as our director likes to say, at MD5, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an insurgency inside of DoD. And innovation insurgency is really what we're trying to do.
Cool. Great. Yeah, and I have to talk into the microphone too. How to think about the opportunity in a broader seed stage funding strategy. Obviously, Techstars has funded thousands of companies at this point. So specifically the AFWorks Techstars piece, what is the strategy that you sort of give to founders?
So one of my personal, I guess, complaint is too strong a word about Techstars. That Techstars, and I was a mentor for many, many years and invested in many, many Techstars companies. Unfortunately, it sometimes appears to be a preparatory school for fundraising. For here's your seed round, and if you do this right, you'll get to your A round. If you do those things right, you'll get to your B round, kind of thing. The program that Conrad and I, is Conrad here? He's my program director. Anyway, the program that we run in Boston is a little bit different. I am casting the SBIR program as a replacement for a seed round. If you win your 50K and your 750, it's 800K. It's a pretty respectable seed round. You would have otherwise given up 20, 25% of your company to a bunch of investors for that, and there's plenty of strings attached to. There's more strings attached, in my opinion, to raising a seed round than there is to the SBIR program. SBIR is almost viewed as free money, at least to me. But a lot of the recrafting that we're doing with this phase 1 and 2 is really to make it more conducive to a startup company. For probably a 10-year period, I taught a wide-a-bid SBIR class at Techstars, okay, to the cohorts in the regular Boston program, and I was very successful with it myself. But I would have a room full of people like this that once or twice a year, and I would say, hey, look, it's free money. You got to go get it. Yeah, you have to put up with timesheets a little bit and whatever, but it's $850,000 for relatively. You have to keep all your equity. And as I would go through all the different things you had to do, first thing, okay, you have to write a 25-page proposal. Okay, half the room would clear out. Okay. And then after I was explained that, and then you have to wait 6 months for your money because it's 4 months to the evaluation, and another half of the remaining people would clear out, okay? And then for the remaining people, it's like, okay, your cost plus fixed fee, you have to start doing timesheets, and you have business development, then you're in a labor, okay, there'll be one guy left in the room, okay? So this is the continuous failure, and I try, but the continuous failure of how to sell small businesses and SBIRs because it was just so unpleasant. So that this new program that we have is trying to fix all these ills so that the room is still full by the end of the class, and why it's a good idea to do SBIR. So I'm pretty excited about that, and it's kind of sort of working. And I still build this. You can't really build it as a revenue on your product. You can't. But what you can to another VC, if you're raising a round, you can build the SBIR program as a replacement for your seed round. Say, look, I got my seed money from somewhere else. Okay, now I'm on to my A round. Now I'll talk to you. Don't try to sell it as revenue, though, because it's really a little disingenuous, and it's really not the case. But you can bill it as a replacement for your seed round.
Perfect. And Anita, as the entrepreneur up here, who's raised several SBIRs at this point, can you kind of speak briefly on your perspective on it's changing, but having gone through the old system,
Sure.
You made it work.
Well, I've been through a number of SBIRs. I didn't run what's called an SBIR shop, where that was the only thing we did. I was very strategic in how I bid them. It's very nice to see these new changes coming about. I've sort of forced those changes in my own way in the past. I bid DARPA, Air Force Research Lab, and Department of Homeland Security in the past. And a lot of it depends on who your program manager is. I never bid anything where they were asking for something, I need this thing right here, right? Which you might have in hardware. I'm in software. Instead, I would look for an SBIR where they had a problem to solve. And they didn't tell you, I wanted to do this and this and this and this. They defined it in a broader way. So CodeDX, my company now, started out with the Department of Homeland Security saying, we have a problem. And the problem is that none of these software scanners work very well. They don't work together. And we're looking for some way, and it's time consuming, and we're looking for solutions. And we came up with an interesting solution, and we bid it, and we went to phase 2, and then then we whispered in the program manager's ear. Okay, so this is where it comes in, where you have an idea, and you say, listen, we only solved this part of the problem. Over here, there's this whole other part of the problem, and if you only look at dynamic scanners, and so a program manager will go, yeah, well, gee, if that's what you're hearing from the market, and so you can take an SBIR and turn it into something that meets your needs. I had one for DARPA several years ago that it was blue force tracking. Right? We never wound up doing blue force tracking. I found out that there were all of these vulnerability assessment teams that had a problem. They were doing war drives all over these different embassies and everywhere, and they had no way of correlating the results. And so I went back to our DARPA program manager and I said, listen, you want us to do blue force tracking, but you really need is to track wireless assets. And he said, just go make money. And so we changed our SBIR around. So you have to find the right program manager and also the right organization. I found that in the past, the Department of Homeland Security is very much into rapid turnaround because they have their emergency responders, and they they need something right away, and so they're looking for good solutions, and they will do innovative procurement. I'm really happy to hear about the new way that Air Force is doing SBIRs, but I hope with Code DX that I won't be bidding any more SBIRs.
Great, great. So I'm going to kick this next little section up to the whole group. Application process too burdensome and time-consuming to be worth it. True or false?
Okay. Under the old regime, the way SBIRs are going right now, for a phase one, like anywhere between $99,000 and $175,000, it takes, and I'm experienced at this, at least 6 man-weeks to bid it. But it is the investment for the phase two as well. So it's 6 to 8 man-weeks, and I got a well-oiled machine for how to do this. Because there are so many things you have to do. I mean, you have to have you have to have the key personnel, and you have to have a certain font and a certain margin width, and you have to answer all these things in the order in which they want them. You can't just tell your story. But I see that as an investment in the phase two. So, like right now, I have a $175,000 DARPA phase one. I'm getting $1 million in February, but that's because I spent all that time in the phase one setting myself up, and then you use the money in the phase one to bid the phase two. So I look at it and say, how much money would I have spent to get investment money? Yeah, there's a cost to do it, but you have to be willing to take on that cost. It's arduous. At least the old way.
So I'll say that it is an arduous process, and it is confusing, and they use terminology that nobody in their right mind would use. But you know, one of the things the SBIR program manager always used to say is the juice worth the squeeze? Mm-hmm. And in this case it is, because if you can put up with the pain of that process and do it. So there's this thing in DoD, in the federal government, called competition. And it means when they put something out for bid, you have to compete against other people. One of the unique things about the SBIR program is, once you get a phase one, your competition is done. Yeah. So then you're no longer competing. And in the future, if the department wants a technology that's based on that SBIR in any way, it's already been competed, so you don't have to compete it again. They can sole source that.
What's the turnaround time now that we're going from a 25-page to a 5-page? Are we going to see a decrease in that turnaround time for results, for decisions?
So I'll let these guys answer that.
I'll say that's the goal, right? So we're literally just doing this for the first time now. Yeah, I'll say that's the goal. So we're literally doing this for the first time. So right now it is the big limitation, just at least from the MD5 standpoint, is manpower. So we're trying to jam through these things as fast as possible. So just to give a context, we had 4 special topics. We had 236 proposals across those, and then we're going to end up in the neighborhood of about 32-ish awards or so, right? So we're going to have to go through that process. But to answer the broader question about whether or not it's worth it, I'll take a slightly nuanced perspective here, and I'll say it depends. It depends on your business. It depends on what your business is. Listen, what part of your potential growth, part of your potential business plan is reliant on your tech being in DoD. It may be, and it also depends on, hey, listen, are you applying for like the mainline sort of traditional SBIR programs, which are still out there? Or are you applying for one of these more streamlines, which are a little bit more narrowly focused, right? So they're not going to cover a lot of the companies that are out there. I mean, we have basically a number of topics that we'll put out with each iteration. But if you're not in that, then you may be having to apply to this broader one. So back to that 6-week piece, is it worth your time? You know, obviously, if you're going to raise a fund, it's going to be, you know, what I think the going metric. I know what they told me at Techstars is plan on at least 100 meetings, you know, just to get your round built out, right? So I mean, that's good. You know, literally, if you're doing it part-time, obviously trying to manage your company at the same time, you know, you're going to spend, you know, 2, 3, maybe even up to 4 months just trying to get your round closed. So it's one of those, hey, listen, where do I have the best probability of success here? And what's going to be better for my business? And that's really what it has to come down to. I mean, I'm not one to go say, hey, just everybody, hey, if you're an entrepreneur, go apply for SBIR. I say it's got to be dependent on your company.
Can I make a comment? And don't ever bid one that has don't ever bid one that has an ITAR restriction on it. Okay? ITAR means that they think that it is a technology that you cannot export. And it's stupid to put an ITAR restriction on an SBIR, but it happens. And unless you are only going to sell to the DoD, it's not worth, that is not worth the time.
One more. So comments on both the new and the old. The new one, at least the AFWorks 005 topic, the proposals were due October 24th. They made all of their award announcements this past weekend. So it was 2.5 weeks, okay, between submission and all of them. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell the number, but it was in excess of the number that Greg just quoted. And I don't know how many they awarded, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around half, okay, of a couple of hundred proposals. So they, rolled up their sleeves and they banged through them. And the fact that it's only a 15-page PowerPoint presentation, they know it was easy for them to sort. Okay, it's a 90-day period performance, as Greg said. Okay, and they're hoping to award the phase 2s not in a year after that, but pretty quick after the phase 1 is done. So that's the new version, which is faster than you'd get an answer from a VC for the most part. Okay, it's so AFWorks and MD5 have these special topics that are all supposed to follow the same pattern, okay? But the AFWorks guys, I don't know what. I think it's because Dr. Will Roper, said we put this challenge in front of the Air Force. I want to do 50 contracts in 50 days, something like that. So the AFWorks guys got a little muscle from the very. He's the Undersecretary of the Air Force for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, who's putting a lot of horsepower behind this. So that's the new one. So very, very different. The old one, though, this goes back a few years, but I think my company between 1990 and 2006 won about $15 million worth of phase 1s and phase 2s, funded everything. Okay, but we had a system down, a really, really good system. We knew what our own technology arc was to be. We knew exactly all the pieces that we ourselves had to make, either with investor money or profit money from our customers, okay? So we had our own technology path, and we busted it up into little pieces, okay? And whenever we would see an SBIR that was anywhere near something that we were doing, we'd take a little chunk out of our own roadmap and say, these guys could fund this piece. And if 40% of the SBIR money was wasted in a very particular specific thing the customer wanted, that was okay, because we knew that we were getting a 60% chunk of our own IP pipeline paid for. So we had a strategy down where we take the closest old proposal that we wrote to somebody else, we'd cut out the meat of it, we already have all the pieces of our technology roadmap already written for various SBIRs. Say, okay, that chunk we'll get these guys to pay for. And so we only had to write a quarter or a third of every new SBIR. And so it took a couple years to get to this point, but I could bang out a new phase 1 proposal in about 10 to 20 hours of my time, because it was mostly written already. I had all the PIs all set already. Costing proposal was already in spreadsheets. It was very, very easy to do. And the way I liken it to people in the class I was teaching SBIRs was like a sailboat. If anybody here has ever sailed a boat, you don't sail the boat directly into the wind. You do what's called tacking, okay? So you might have a course, and you go, if this is your course, you have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth across the path that you want to go, and that's what the SBIRs were like. So we got them to fund all the technology, and yes, some of it was waste and some of it was throwaway, but we were tacking back and forth against this course. So if you can figure out how to do it, it is continuous free money, wasting a little bit, but still you're not giving up any equity in the company.
That was a great segue into the next question. Stigma of DoD market as a distraction from a core business model. I think you clearly, 15 million is pretty impressive to have raised, and it seems like you did a really good job of, whether it was a Gantt chart or however you sort of broke things down into chunks and said, these are the chunks that we're going to attack in this order. As an investor, on the one hand, it's great if I see that a company's raised non-dilutive funding, because that means that they're probably not as stressed as other companies might be about raising money. But on the flip side, does that change their priorities? Are you, like you said, 40% might have been, oh man, there's this really nuanced idea that, you know, the Air Force widget community needs and no one else wants. Did you, and you mentioned at the terminal end, it was 85% was commercial. Was that part of that arc as well, where you sort of said we wanted to get to that point, or it just?
So we thought, that's an excellent question. We thought we knew where we were going when we started out. And it turns out that you're always wrong, okay? And if you take $10 million from a VC and you do what's called a moonshot, okay, which is, let me take my engineering team and hide them off in a corner for 4 years or 3 years, whatever, and we think that, you know, we're going to fire the missile. We think there's an island there. The target we think is there. And we will hide from the customers, and we'll send the engineering team off into the corner, and we think we know exactly what we need to do, and we can ignore the marketplace for a while. We have the luxury of all this money, so we'll go do this moonshot, okay? Well, what can go wrong? The rocket can blow up in the middle, okay? The rocket can run out of fuel in the middle because you thought it was $10 million and it's really $38 million to get to where you need to go. You thought that the target was where it was, but you know what? Target wasn't really where it was. It was over there, okay? And you missed it. And you finished the product, but you got it wrong, okay? So from the perspective of a venture capitalist, I prefer the moonshot. Venture capitalists might say, I prefer the moonshot. I don't want anybody distracted by the course. If you think the target is there, it's there. But from my personal experience, I actually prefer the sailboat tacking approach because I really didn't know where I had to go. And I allowed the marketplace and the money to pull me, the wind, to pull me in the direction I needed to go. So my company survived, but I wound up in a different place, and I actually wound up in the right place because I was educated by the market going, along the way, and profitable at the same time. And yes, some of my SBIR money was, pulled us off a little bit, but it ended. Okay, and I got a new contract that pulled me in a different direction. Okay, and that ended, and I got a new contract, and then I had commercial customers start to yank on me at the same time. So given the luxury of a profitable existence and a marketplace that was continually pulling me in the right direction, I wound up in the right place. So now if a company says, yeah, I got some SBIR money and they're pulling me in this direction, okay, I figure, okay, there's some percentage of the right direction that it's, is being applied, and some percentage that's going to be waste, but that's okay. It's all right. I prefer to have a little bit of a signal, a little bit of somebody else's money, dragging the company roughly in the right direction. So I view it positively. A lot of VCs, I think, would view it negatively, though, still.
I'd just like to add something to that. Is one thing, as you hear Warren's story described, he took this tacking path, with the SBIR, versus taking the VC moonshot, right? So with the VC moonshot comes control, right? So it comes with board seats, voting shares, things like that. The beauty about his approach is that he can make those decisions to tack all day long, and no one's going to question him other than his co-founders and his employees, right? So if you start trying to do that thing when you already have VCs on your cap table and in your board meetings, then that's going to create a little bit different dynamic, and that kind of speaks to the distraction piece that you're talking about. So a lot of it, again, I hate to keep coming back to this company specific. It depends upon even you probably want to give some thought to even the control dynamics within your companies as well too, because that'll inform the pressures that you're going to receive from outside of your management team.
This isn't written, but I just thought of this question as you said it, because as an early stage investor, most of my companies want guidance and support, and I'm curious. I'm asking an audience question at this point. Is there any kind of guidance that the SBIR crew was giving you? Were there sort of any milestones or check? It was just money and set it and forget it money.
It was more set it and forget it. I mean, we did not have guidance, and actually that's something that I do miss. I mean, we used the SBIR money and we self-funded, and there were things that we had to learn along the way. We didn't have somebody telling us how to do this. We had to learn board structure and all kinds of things, because the SBIR program it really is just government money. It's free money, and the program managers are government program managers, and they have not run a business, and you're on your own in terms of that.
So let me add one thing. I worked on a pilot program that DoD did a couple years ago, and we spent 2 years working with SBIR companies. That program name was Velociter. Some of you may have heard of that. And it started with a focus on commercialization. DoD said, stats are really bad. We need to improve our ability for companies to commercialize technologies out of this program. After about the first 8 months, what we realized is those companies don't need help with commercialization. They need help with companies. They need help with understanding what business development is, what capture is, how to identify a market. So we focused the rest of the program on that. A lot of those training courses, we did podcasts, we did videos. Those are online and available on the DoD website. If you go to the DoD SBIR site and go to training, a lot of those are still available. But what we found is a lot of SBIR companies, especially the first-time companies, had been so focused on the invention, I'm a scientist, I'm an engineer, they really didn't want to be a business owner. They didn't want to put up with those things that they needed to do to be successful.
And so I guess I'll speak to this question. SBIR versus VC. I don't know that it needs to be necessarily a versus, because yeah, we have different objectives. But it's not this, zero-sum game where if you take VC money, you can't take SBIR. I have one company that's had an SBIR, and it's great because I'm one of 2 people on a cap table. So selfishly, I want to own as much of the company as possible. Every time somebody puts money in, that dilutes me a little bit. So if they can keep taking free money, I'm all about it. And so they have been very disciplined, I think, about their approach in a similar fashion, saying, if we take the money, it's almost like drug dealer, right? If I take the hit, what is the downside implications? Services company stigma. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. When they come out with this topics list, they're generally saying this is a problem, right? The Air Force needs something to solve this problem. And they're typically wanting a solution, but it seems from an outsider's perspective that the SBIR system tends to have companies go towards service providers versus COTS product survivors. True or false, and is that a problem?
So the Small Business Innovation Research Program, if you read its very purpose, it's to generate COTS product companies and generate economic development, get these companies to become commercial vendors of commercial products. Yet the design of the program is a breeding ground for defense contractors. And if you just read it, or if you've been in it, it unfortunately was designed and built by defense contractors who didn't know any better. There's no other explanation, really. People who came out of defense contractors and labs, and they're accustomed to the cost plus fixed fee model and the timesheet system and what's your G&A rate and the overhead rate, and negotiate on the profit. And it was they just didn't call anybody from the commercial products world to, or from the venture capitalists could have done a better job at designing the program as well, because they would have been like, look, okay, great, this is substitute VC money. These guys are making a product. Here's how we In-Q-Tel was like the first step in that direction of really bridging the gap. And I think they did a great job, and In-Q-Tel is a great example of how to do it right. The SBIR program does need to be morphed into something that looks more like In-Q-Tel, DIU, and this new variant of the SBIR program is, we stole the proposal process from DIUX. It's the exact same, we just lifted it, essentially 15-page PowerPoint, 5-page technical proposal. It's great. So by word and intent, the SBIR program is supposed to be more like In-Q-Tel DIU, but it isn't. It just isn't. It was malformed at birth, in my opinion. So we're now in the process of fixing it to do what it originally was intended to do, which I think is a wonderful thing. It's 30 years a little late, and I don't know how many trillions of dollars, and 30 years times $2.5 billion a year overall is what, $75 billion? Is that right? Down the tube, so to speak. You know, and you know, people like Anita here did the right thing. People like me did the right thing despite the program. You know, we fought against it. Had running 2 different businesses at the same time, a labor contracting business internal in order to satisfy the SBIR program, the government contractors, and then a COTS product business with double the overhead, essentially 2 businesses running in one. Very hard to do a complicated business like that. Just so much easier to backslide into the defense contracting, which is why the stats are so poor regarding how many of the companies actually become COTS product companies. It's because of this you know, the dark side. You're drawn by the dark side and the money and the profit. It's just so much easier, and this is what they want, and they're asking for it, and they keep asking me for my rates and asking me for my next rev and the hours and everything. It's just you're fighting against it in order to become a COTS product company, despite the fact that the program was upfront about we want to make COTS product companies. So we're trying to fix this problem now, but it's a schizophrenic. It's a schizophrenic program, unfortunately, at the moment.
Well, hopefully it's not all doom and gloom. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yep. Question.
Hi, my name is Dan Downs. I'm co-founder of a company called R3 Printing. If you guys can disclose, question for you, Greg. How many of those AFWorks Phase 1 SBIRs converted of the 236? Just curious.
Oh, that's just okay. So those are just proposals. Okay. So even if we had that answer, that is something I would not be able to tell you, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is that right now we're in the down select process for that. So that's just everything that came in the door. So now, you know, so stand by on what's next.
Deborah Lay for NYU. When's the next round?
The pre-solicitation just opened yesterday.
So it's actually November 28th.
The pre-solicitation just opened for 19-1, so they went live yesterday, so we can communicate with the companies for the next 30 days, and then we'll start accepting proposals after that.
And you doing it in the new format?
Well, for the special topics, just the special topics. The other ones are still in the previous format.
Angelo Alicio here with Techstars, the Barclays program. Thanks for your time here, by the way. And just want to know what, if any, options are there for international founders and international teams who are looking to enter the U.S. market or already have either a base here, but just you know, are originated outside the U.S.
So I'll speak just from my perspective, and I'll let the rest of the panel kind of speak on theirs. Right now, it is a known hurdle. I would kind of say Warriors right now. I don't really have a good answer for you at the moment because there's some legal things that we got to figure out. First one, we got to figure out what all the rules are, and then figure out how we can legally work around them, right? So I mean, I know it's probably not a satisfying answer, but that's my honest answer right now.
So I've looked at this for a number of SBIRs, and the last time I looked, which was a few weeks ago, you had to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. Now, there are other research vehicles that will fund your work besides the SBIR, and those are other BAAs. And depending on the agency, some of them actually collaborate with international organizations, and they look for international partners. So the Department of Homeland Security, for example, is funding a New Zealand university, and has they're actually spreading their money around the world. But in the SBIR program, as far as I know, you have to be either U.S. citizen or permanent resident.
So 51% of the ownership of the company has to be a U.S. citizen or U.S. person. 49% can be anybody else. And also there's now some arcane rules about percentage of venture capitalists that can own it. So now it becomes even a little bit less, because if 20% of your company is owned by this venture capitalist and they're a U.S.-based venture capitalist, and 20% by that one, and 20% by that one, and the rest of U.S. citizens, there's this equation, this complicated table that they have now that you have to look through. But it actually it loosened up the rules quite a bit. So that's one route, is just go find some U.S. citizens, put them on your cap table, give them a piece of the company, sell them a piece of the company, whatever. The other one is we've had I've had some foreign companies say, hey, I want to participate as well, companies that are applying to my program, and I said, great, go find a US-based small business and subcontract to them. Form a team, okay? In the phase 1, I believe the old rules were, and these new ones, I don't know that we actually have gone to that level of figuring this out, but the old ones, 66% of the phase 1 must be done by the prime contractor, 33% can be done by anybody. So a small business could have had Lockheed Martin as a 33% subcontractor. In the phase 2, it's 51-49. 51% of the prime contract has to be done by the prime, and 49% can be done by a sub. So if a foreign company wants to do an SBIR, they just have to find a prime who's another small business who's not competing with them, and they partner together, and then they can, it's not all the money, but it is 49% of the phase 2, which is a substantial amount of money.
Hi, my name is Frank Yu. I work for SOS Ventures, and I work in the blockchain accelerator here in New York. But we run a series of other accelerators in the world, like in hardware and biotech. But the question I have is, what percentage of your supply chain components have to be US made to be considered a US made product? And the second thing is, I'm prior service, and I'd like to know, is there any special programs for veterans applying to these programs as well as to accelerators? Thank you.
Okay, so tell Sean O'Sullivan I said hello, by the way. I haven't seen him in quite a while, but he's from Boston, and I knew him a long time ago. You work with Sean Broderick at all? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Mr. Duty. Yeah, okay. Another friend of mine. Anyway, veterans, you may be familiar with the 8A program. Okay, that's beyond SBIR, but 8A is a program for minorities and veterans and injured veterans, and there's all kinds of different categories of people that have favorable status. It's not the SBIR program, but it's sometimes even better than the SBIR program in that if you're an Alaskan Native American that is a veteran, has been injured, you can essentially sit back and just collect checks, okay? You start up a company and sub everything out, and you're in great shape, okay? It's not quite as severe, but there's all these different metrics, okay? So that's one. The second part of your question, I forgot already. Okay.
What percentage has to be manufactured in the US? Because all the supply chain components, a lot of it comes from China.
So the SBIR is unfortunately still viewed as a labor contract right now. It shouldn't be, but it is. There's nothing that says that the product itself has to be 100% manufactured in the United States. If you buy all of the parts in China, you assemble it here, and you sell it to the US DoD, it's part of your SBIR. It's not. There's no domestic content requirement in an SBIR contract.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Eric Horan, Decisive Point. So we started the discussion with the moderator saying that DoD is unique because we're addressing specific DoD problems. Obviously, if you read the 18.3 topics, there are some Navy ones that are ridiculously specific to corrosion on certain hulls that would not scale into commercial products, just a fact. Then you have sort of the other end of the spectrum, as you said, sir, completely open, bring in your commercial technology, we'll work with you to solve a problem. Where do you think we should go on the spectrum? I mean, I don't think either. I love the open topic for the venture community and my startups, but isn't there an opportunity to say, let's open them up, but then give them sort of siloed machine learning applications for certain things, and just have a whole segment of open topics, but sort of tailored? Sort of meet in the middle a little bit. Can you talk to that?
Well, so if you look at the MD5 topics, right? If you look at 18.3, we did exactly that, right? So we're trying to thread a needle between having them be within a specific vertical, but also broad enough that we are, we don't want to get into the standard DoD business of defining the solution versus defining the problem, right? So, like the most recent one with the 18.3 was there was like machine learning. There was a cyber protection of physical systems. There's another one was medical technology and triage. So we do have some specializations within at least the MD5 special topics. And then every single period, you will start to see a couple themes kind of come through. You may start to see problems repeat themselves over a couple years or things like that. So we are actually trying to do exactly what you just described. And what I'll say, kind of like a little public service announcement for anyone thinking about this, the things, at least for the MD5 special topics, are going to give you the best chance of success are going to be if you display a clear understanding of the problem you're trying to provide. One thing that MD5 is not doing, we're not looking for basic research. We're not looking for research programs. We're looking for people who, hey, listen, I have this solution. Either I already have it or I'm building it, and I do think that there's a DoD application. Well, this is the opportunity. And, on a lot of your pitch decks, probably say, oh yeah, hey, and this product would then we could also sell it to DoD. Well, this is the actual opportunity to kind of say, hey, DoD, by the way, I've been saying this in my pitches to VCs. This is how I think this could fit within this problem area. But but specifically go into that problem area, and give us a problem in that problem area, and then that'll increase your probability of success on that one.
So shameless plug for Columbia, since we're in the Columbia lab. There's actually a class that I teach called Hacking for Defense. And part of the curation process really is figuring out, is it really specific where it's like, okay, on hulls that exceed 75 feet, we want barnacles more than 3 inches to be removed by some chemical solution. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there was a Navy problem where they said, we want Alexa on the battlefield. So they've pretty much defined exactly the solution they're looking for. There's not a lot of leeway. Okay, well, here's Alexa. We'll put some rubber around it and make it waterproof. But in both scenarios, you're right. Like figuring out what is it that like the class I teach is essentially get out of the classroom and talk to 10 potential customers each week, figuring out what is the pain point they actually have, kids in college classrooms don't necessarily like to get up and walk around, but you're going to have to do the same thing in a lot of cases where they might say this is exactly what they want, and they really have no idea. They just think that that's what they want. Some colonel, general, SES at some level said, this is what I want, because they watched a commercial late at night that said, oh, Alexa can solve all your problems.
So can I make one more? I brought some materials. They're over here on the table. One of those is a business card size that has the schedule for solicitations coming up. We've talked a couple of times about 19.1. 19.1 goes into pre-solicitation on the 28th of November. Oh, sorry. While it's in pre-solicitation for 30 days, you have the opportunity to call, talk to, email the point of contact for that topic. If you're thinking about doing that, that is a great way to get an understanding of what it is they really think they're looking for. So that's over there. 19.1, the first topic of the year, is usually the largest. So there will be 500 plus topics on the street to take a look at.
Last question.
Just to add to Eric's question there, machine learning and AI is being thrown around a lot. The only example I saw was DIUX releasing some geo data for the machine learning to actually happen. And with, Fatima, Kraus Aerospace, we've been working with JRAC and others to get some kind of access to historical data. But as part of some of your SBIR and other components, are you looking to open up historical data with context for some of the AI and machine learning companies that are playing in the space? Because without that, it's AI for the sake of being AI, essentially. So what are some of your thoughts around some of that? AppWorks and MD5 and others who are trying to push down.
So here's what I can say from an MD5 perspective, because this question has come up before. So when we, if we find that a company that we want to work with requires a data set, we don't have the data, but what we can do is we can start picking up the phone and trying to see if we can put you in contact with the agency, whether or not that's the Air Force or Navy or some specific office, to get you access to that data. We just don't have our own. So it's one of those things where I can't promise you that we'll be able to get you the data, but we'll try to get whoever we contract with, we'll try to get them whatever we need. And and there'll be and there'll be a core that's going to try to work, that will work with each one of the teams to work on really trying to facilitate that. But it's not guaranteed. I'm just being candid on that one.
No, it's great, but at least there's some thought there.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people sometimes, come to me who want to do business with the DoD and say, "Hey, can you go find me the guy who's responsible for this?" And it's like, this is a 3 million person organization, and a third of them hate the other third that hate the other third, and they all think they're each other, are incompetent, and I wouldn't do it that way. And it's not nobody speaks with a monotonic voice in the Department of Defense. We're also looking for AI, for our program as well, but I don't have, terabyte drives of data sitting there waiting to give to somebody. So it really does depend who the customer is, what they're asking for, and whether they're actually willing to give you data. I was president of an AI company for a little while, trying to do business in the DoD, and people would walk in and say, okay, yeah, we have data, but we can't give it to you. It's all classified, okay? If you go try to find data from the periscope of a submarine, okay? You know where that data ever goes? Nowhere. Okay, every image, every piece of data that ever came out of a periscope of a submarine lives and dies on that submarine. It never leaves, okay? So go try to train an AI up on periscope data, okay? It's not possible. It's not possible. You have to. There's a lot of parts of the DoD where if you have a DNN or something, a deep learning neural network, an AI engine, you give them the blank engine, and then you never hear from them again. Okay, they'll vanish. Maybe they have data, maybe they use data, maybe they tagged it, maybe they didn't tag it. You'll never hear from them again. Okay, so that's one kind of customer. Another kind of customer will come to you and say, "Hey, do you have the data? I don't have any data. Can I get data from you?" And it's actually a very sexy pitch to give them. Say, hey, I have better data than you do, and you're probably right. Much of the time, if you a lot of these ag tech type drone companies that have drones flying all over the place, taking huge amounts of data, they have more data than the Department of Defense does. Okay, and it's certainly more than in one place. One satellite program that's taking data of just that one satellite, they're not going to share the data with another satellite from some other program. That's all very, very siloed. So don't expect to walk into somebody in the DoD and say, "Oh, I need terabytes and terabytes of this fine quality tag data to train my DNN." They'll look at you like, "Pfft, and we were hoping you would give that to us," kind of thing.
So two things. One, MITRE, which runs a federally funded research and development center for the Department of Defense, actually has a new initiative called Generation AI, where they're planning on making publicly available large terabyte level data sets, and they have sort of a almost crowdsourcing model where they're planning on partnering with major universities to try and build this out and make and provide broad access to AI tools. As an example of the department actually doing something along the lines of sharing data, one of the hackathons that we're planning for this coming year, we are actually planning on pulling together large volumes of data, so that people can exercise their AI to see whether or not they can develop a tool that actually is relevant and has an impact on the Department of Defense. To your point more broadly, this is not going to be the last panel discussion that we have. I hope to continue having panel discussions, one on funding in the defense and dual use market space, two, on who the sort of first and fast movers are in this space. So MD5 is one. You also hear about things like the Defense Innovation Unit experimental.
Not experimental anymore.
That's right, no. Full operational capability now. So DIU. There are others out there planning on bringing them in to meet you and you and you. And then finally, more directly to your point, really bringing out the sort of the end users and the people with the very direct problems to talk about, okay, I keep hearing AI, ML. What are the applications you're talking about? I'm not sure if I'm comfortable actually partnering with the Department of Defense. I kind of want to know what you want to use it for. Let's have that conversation, find where the common ground is. I do want to call out Oliver and Alice over here on Street Smarts VR. They're hosted out of the Columbia University Startup Lab here, and you want to tell them about your very recent experience with SBIR?
Sure. And any money is good money at this point because we're super young, and we got it, which is super cool. All right, yeah. We don't know anything about contracting with the government, so we're going to come and talk to each of you and try to pick your brains after this. But like you all are saying, going the VC route takes a ton of time. Just as many metrics, and it's like, we're brand new. We don't have what you're asking for. But the DoD was way more open. I'm a vet. Alice also EMT and firefighter. So like the first responder community is coming together, which is very encouraging.
So when I walked by you the other night, how many hours had you put into that application? How long ago was that between flashbang from when you applied to when you got the announcement?
From when we applied to the announcement, 2.5 weeks.
Yep. And then how much time did you put into that?
Maybe 20 to 30 hours for the application. A lot of it was repurposed from VC decks and all that good stuff. So I mean, I like to think that we had some of it ready, but some of it we had to scratch our head. And it's like, which units would you talk to first? And it's like, well, you know, giddy up.
So bottom line, there are a lot of ways to do well by doing good in the world. There's a path forward with the department. I hope to continue the discussion with all of you about good ways forward. And I hope to do it downstairs. The people in the crowd, many of them are much more interesting, with all due respect, than the people up on the panel. So I hope you hang around for that discussion. See you downstairs.